Hello and welcome, I'm Kira Scribner, and today I'm going to do my February TBR. I am really excited for the books that I'm planning on reading. Am I going to go through all of these? Probably not. But these are all books that I have from the library, I have from my own shelves, I have started, the whole thing. The first book I am going to talk about is a book that I am just really loving. This is the Eustace Diamonds by Anthony Trollope. I've talked a little bit about this in January. This follows an anti-hero named Lizzie Greystock, and she, as a young 19-year-old, marries a Lord Florian Eustace who is dying, and he dies within the year, leaving her a young widow with these beautiful diamonds. And the drama of the story begins here as she is trying to keep these diamonds and everyone is trying to take the diamonds away from her. And it is a classic Anthony Trollope. I love his stories, I love his heroines, I love his clever writing. I think that the first line just shows what a wonderful writer he is. It was admitted by all her friends, and also by her enemies, who were in truth the more numerous and active body of the two, that Lizzie Greystock had done very well for herself. We will tell the story of Lizzie Greystock from the beginning, but we will not dwell over it at great length like we might have done if we had loved her. We also meet a foil to her who is very graceful and kind and meek, and we also see various men that intersect with both of these ladies, and it is super interesting. I am really loving this book. The next book I'm going to be reading in February is a book that I already started, and this is Emily of New Moon by Lucy Maud Montgomery. She is one of my favorite authors. She is an author of Anne of Green Gables, and this story also follows an orphan. And I am probably only like 30 or so pages into it, but I'm really enjoying the story so far. So at the beginning of the novel, Emily's father is still alive, but he is dying. He has very little left in his life. Her mother has been dead since she was 4 years old, but her mother's family was very rich and very proud. She has never met any of her family members, and now she is going to go and live with her family who despised her father and thought poorly of her mother, and she's very imaginative and very bold and not very meek. And we've already seen how this contrasts against her mother's family, and I don't even know who she's going to live with. I'm assuming it's the New Moon Farm because one of them lives on the New Moon Farm, but it is going to be delightful, I think. And one of the lines that I love, when her father is dying, she says she wants to go with him, and he said, "You have not yet known how kind time can be." And I think that's just beautiful. And then at one point they're telling her how bold she is and how terrible she is, and she says, "I like myself very much." And I just love Lucy Maud Montgomery's strong heroines. She herself was practically an orphan. Her mother died when she was very young, and her father remarried and left her with her maternal grandparents, and she went to live with her father at various times, but he was not a very good father. So we have these elements of a child who is being shuttled around to different family members, and the least important of those families, and being told she should be grateful, and she is being a little bit more strong-willed in it. I can already see the ways in which I think Emily will have the same nature of Anne, as in bringing joy and kindness and a new perspective to those around her who feel like they're set in their ways and can't have any choices. And I don't know, I'm just really excited to experience a new Lucy Maud Montgomery book. And then from classics, I'm going to go to comics, and I have the other history of the DC universe. I was really excited that I found these single issues at my local comic store. I'm always afraid because it's intimidating to go, but I went. I read the first three and they became absolute favorites, and then I found this one. This one is the fourth, and I just think all of it is so interesting. It tells history as if when these characters were introduced, that we have their stories chronologically, and it also deals with real events that were happening in the US during the time as well. So I have not read this. This one follows The Question, and then the last one follows Thunder. But the first three I read, and the first two especially, I just really loved it. It looks at Black Lightning and at Bumblebee and Guardian, and I think that their stories are so cool. So I will probably reread the first three as well, but I'm really excited to continue on. And then I also got from the library these two, which are She-Hulk. I really like She-Hulk, and I'm a really big fan of Casualty Comics, who just has all of the whims and talks about the things and all of the backstory of She-Hulk, which I find super interesting. It is like the best thing for my nerdy brain, and I started this run online when it was premiering, and now I think there's 3 of them out in these little bind-ups. So I'm really excited to actually read them when I can read through the full story, and yes, I'm super excited for that. The next book is a long-awaited book that I should have picked up a long time ago, and this is Redemptor by Jordan Ifueko. Raybearer was one of my favorite books of 2020, and I reread it in 2021, and I've never read Redemptor because I feel like when you have a favorite book, you feel so intimidated, but I love this series. It is about this girl who has been grown up in complete isolation. When she touches things, you can see the memories. And we have this boy who is the crowned heir, and how royalty works in this is that they have 4 or 5 people who come around in the council, and they protect him, and it is such an interesting and cool magic system, and I love the characters so much, and I just have such an affinity for them. So I'm really excited. She just announced that there will be another book set in this world, so I am just overjoyed. I think that she's a brilliant writer and I can't wait for more that Jordan Ifueko writes. So I feel like it's finally time for me to read Redemptor. I don't know that much about the next book, but it is Tremor by Teju. And I heard someone talk about this writer and how much of a brilliant writer he is, and I was like, I want to pick up something by him. So I am really excited to dive into his work in February. Going from an author that I am trying for the first time to an author that I am in love with, this is Remember Us by Jacqueline Woodson. I have given my love for Jacqueline Woodson over and over again, and this is a new, is it middle grade or YA? I'm not sure, but she is a brilliant author. This is short and compact, and she writes really lyrical books that dive into many topics. This is about memory and friendship and the way that we continue on in life. And I am just really excited to dive into her newest release. A book that turns 100 years old in 2024 is The Man in the Brown Suit by Agatha Christie. I like my girl Agatha Christie most of the time, and I'm excited to read this one. It introduces some new detectives, and I'm excited to dive into more of her books. And it takes place on a boat, I think, from the cover. Eastbound is a translated book that feels like it's a little true crimey because it's about this train and it's going forth and people are trying to solve things. And I originally found out about this book through the 100 Notable Books of the New York Times, and I said in that I wasn't going to read it. And then I saw it appear on my Libby app, and it was 2 hours, and I was like, well, at this point, if it's that short, I may as well enjoy it. So hopefully I like this book, and I love reading translated fiction as well, so I feel like that will be cool. A book that I've been wanting to get my hands on for a long time is Western Lane by Chetna and Maroo. This is a book that I wanted to win the Booker in the fall, but it is about this family that's dealing with grief and squash, and this 10-year-old who is just like, their family is obsessed with excellence and the way that this interacts with the grief after their mother dies. And I think that it will just be really glorious, and I've been so excited to read it. Clap When You Land is a book that has been on my shelf for a long time. I started in 2020 and I absolutely love it. Like, I read it and it's a novel in verse, and it's intersecting these two half-sisters that don't know they're half-sisters, and then their father dies and they both learn of each other. And I read the first 100 and some pages and I was in love with it. And then my roommate came in and I was reading it to her, and then we started from the beginning, and then a friend of mine died, and this book deals with grief. So it has been sitting unread for almost 4 years. I've been thinking, am I going to read this physically? I have read 2 Elizabeth Acevedo books since. I read her poem Inheritance as well as her new novel Family Lore, and I still have not gone back and read this book. So I think that I'm gonna get the audiobook. I love her audiobooks. She always narrates them herself, and I think this will be really delightful. So I think this is a way that I'm gonna pick it up and finally check this book off, that it would have been a favorite of 2020 if I had finished it. A book that I'm super intrigued about is The Life and Times of Hannah Crafts, and this is apparently like an exploration and finding and uncovering of the first Black novelist who was born into slavery. And I don't know the full story because I haven't read this. I've just looked at the blurb, and that sounds so cool. And you know, February is Black History Month, so I think that's perfect. And I'm just really excited to dive into this book and learn about like people that we never hear about. I find that super interesting. The Wren is a book that looks at a mother and daughter and their relationship with the man that has gone, who is their father. And he is a poet and a writer. He writes these mournful, amazing prose and poetry about his family, even though he abandoned them. Meanwhile, we see the reflection of the man he actually is. And that sounds like so good. I love the idea of exploring loving someone who uses you as art, and then also the public versus private understanding of a human. I think this will be super good. I've been like waiting to read this, and I'm super excited to read it in February. I'm sure I will pick up many books throughout the month. I tend to start with that idea, and then I find something, I watch people talk about books, and I add an ad. This just happened with me with a poetry collection, Things You May Find Hidden in My Ear. Cindy talked about this on her channel. We all love her. This is about a young boy who was born in Gaza and has spent his entire life there. He talks about the experience of dealing with that as a child growing up in a war zone, and now as a young father having that experience as well. And this won one of the Palestinian Book Awards in 2022, and I found it in my library and I was like, yes, I will be reading this. I love poetry, and I think that it is such an evocative way to get into the understanding of a country, understanding of a people group, and like what they're going through, because it is informative and it's interesting, but it also dives into how someone is feeling. I think that poetry transports us in such a unique way. So I am really excited to read this, and I really hope I love it. Those are the books that I am planning on reading in February. I hope you have a wonderful February, and I will see you soon. Bye.